Okay, if I'm not mistaken, we left off, we've been talking about the anatomy of the lungs, and we have talked about the trachea, we've talked about the bronchi, and is this correct? Is this where we left off? I don't think I had started getting into the alveoli yet. And at this point, I think we left off talking about the structure of the lungs. And we used to have an alveoli. I just don't know where it went to. I'll try to find it. And one of the things to remember, once again, left versus right, 3 versus 2. We've got the cardiac notch. We've got the area known as the hilum, where it looks like this one region for the stuff to move in and out of the lungs. But the part that we really need to get to is we need to get down to our histology. Because if we get down to the histology, at this point, what level are we getting to? Our cellular level. We're going to need, once again, to understand what's going to happen at this cellular level to know how the lungs are functioning overall. So as we begin to look at this structure, and as we work our way down, I think what it was, we had left off, and I had got you guys to notice this huge amount of the blood vessels, okay? So here's what begins to happen. When we have those lungs, and I'm just trying to see if there's anywhere
That's like a wooden one or something.
wow.
Versus the other.
Aww, we have a broken heart.
Oh.
Oh, oh, that is so sad. Oh man. Okay. Well, we're gonna try to at least give it back its heart. Okay. You know, so that it doesn't look so pitiful. Oh my gosh, bless its heart. Okay. It looks like something off the Terminator, I think. Y'all remember when he had just the one little eye? Anyway, okay. Y'all can tell I've watched too many movies. Now, but this one right here, this one is trying to give us a view. So if we go back to the other slide, see how they're kind of showing us the trachea right here coming down, and they're still giving us a little bit of the lungs, okay? So if we look left versus right, all right, and then, you know, we've got this area that's the cardiac notch because of the way that the heart settles in. I guess that's a good way for us to put it. So if we look at this structure, they're giving us a good view right here of the branching that takes place. Do you guys remember this bikini spot, the carina? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, as we begin to have this branching from where we have these main bronchi, and then we begin to get the primary, tertiary, and so forth, as we move into each side of the lungs, and do you remember how we had one into the upper lobe, one into the middle lobe, one into the lower lobe, one into the lobe, one into the lobe, and then that begins to branch off, okay? Before we get to this area of this alveolus, there's about 7 generations of branching that takes place before we get to this sack of grapes.
Generations.
In other words, one generation of branching, a second generation of branching, a third generation branching, and we finally, and it's about 7 times that that'll take place, and we finally make it to what I call the grapes. Okay, the alveolus. Please don't leave my class and go into your clinicals and call it the grapes. Okay, but you kind of see what I'm saying, right? Because they look like a bunch of grapes. Now, one of the things that we find very highly vascularized. All right? So, as we begin to look at this branching that will occur, okay, we're going to have it going into branching, and we're going to find that we encounter respiratory bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, our alveoli, an alveolar duct, and then our alveolar sacs. So at that point that we're going to get down to, which is going to be the sac, okay, we're going to find that the structure at that point gets a tad bit interesting. Now, if we remember what is responsible, what's taking place in this part of the body. Now, go back to thinking about our heart, okay? The right side of the heart, if you remember, has to go into this pulmonary branch, and we're going to branch off into right versus left. It's not under a lot of pressure, okay? But the job is to get that blood flow to the area where gas exchange can occur. It's going to be at this level. Note, I love this picture, okay? Because this picture is showing how air that's been inhaled can make its way in, okay? And then how we're going to have the connection on each one of these sacs, okay? At every single one of them, we're going to have our connection to the blood vessels. So it's at this level right here where everything happens.
This is kind of morbid, but if someone drowned, would the water getting to these alveolar sacs be part
Yes.
of the...
At the point that they could no longer hold their breath, okay, at that point, they're going to take in water. So they'll take in water through their nose, through their ears, through their mouth, okay? And it has, I mean, only so much can go into like swallowing, and at that point it'll begin to move into these actual tissues, especially through the nose. So, if we look at the structure right here, okay, we can see that our air will be breathed in. We'll continue with that air coming in, going through branching after branching after branching after branching, making their way into this region of the lungs as we're working our way into these respiratory bronchioles, these terminal bronchioles, getting into the alveoli, getting into the alveolar duct, getting into the sacs. All right? Now, do you happen to notice anything else that I haven't mentioned in the structure right here? Let's look here. sort of look like to you? Huh? What? Who keeps taking my point? Does it look like anything to you?
Muscle.
What kind of muscle?
Skeleton. Or smooth.
We're in an organ now, so we're going to see smooth muscle. Do we control smooth muscle?
No.
No. Okay. So what does that maybe tell you?
Autonomic.
Okay, we're going to have a connection to the autonomic nervous system. We're going to have a connection to the respiratory center of the brain. Of all of these organs that come, that are innervated with the autonomic nervous system, this one is probably one that we have a lot of an effect over. But, let me think here for a second. Is it really my effect? Or are there going to be a couple of other things coming into play that are making me go, it gets kind of interesting. So, as we look at this structure, okay, we're going to find that this muscle and this structure that we're going to have, we're going to see it be very elastic. We're going to have about 300 million of these little sacky things, okay, that are in the lungs. And when we begin to look at the structure with this smooth muscle, it's very elastic, has the ability to stretch and recoil very easily, along with some of the other tissue of the lung. Now, the other good thing that happens at this area, the walls of these alveolar sacs, they're very thin. Okay? So, when we begin to look at the structure that we're finding, we're going to have an area that we get to, and it's going to be the respiratory membrane. Up to this point, we have an idea about a membrane in our bodies, right? I'm going to have to get you to think outside the box a little bit. All right? It's going to be a little different here in the lungs. The membrane, it's going to be the barrier between alveolar air and the blood. So that means in this alveolus, okay, the air that could be here meeting the blood. Because the one thing about this area, it is very well vascularized.